Thank you for joining me for mindfulness in the week 2 of Mind, Body, Mental Fitness. I'm sorry we were doing this virtually this week, but with bad weather comes configuration, and here we are. So I hope you enjoy. We're just going to go through the slides, and you'll notice at the very end you will find a slide that is all of our resources. So please click on those links. Look at the videos, try the deep breathing, read what some of these great websites have to offer on mindfulness, but also remember that I will cover all this again during another session, just so we can get some questions out there if you have any. So this week we're looking at mindfulness, and I want to start out with just our brief definition. This is what your basic dictionary says mindfulness is. Mindfulness defined as the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something. So you're understanding what is happening, whether it's in yourself or with somebody else. It also states it's a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment. So while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, bodily sensations, we're looking at a used therapeutic technique, right? So if we think about mindfulness in the definition here, we can say we know that we are mindful when we wake up. We are mindful before we make decisions. We are mindful before we go to work. Those are all things that are mindful. We know what decision we're making before we make it. And through this, we will look a little bit more at the difference between mindful and mindful. And there's a slide next that really shows how those two, even though they're the same word, how very different they are. Because I think we forget that our mind can just be full, and that we aren't using mindfulness techniques to really focus on the fullness that is coming. And when we have things like stress and anxiety in our life, we forget to use these mindfulness techniques. So here we have the mindful / mindful. And when we think about mindful, like our mind is just full, right? And you can see it from the picture. We've got documents, we've got delays, we've got meetings, we've got emails, we've got what's going on next week. Your mind is somewhere else. You're trying to concentrate on one thing, but you are also trying to focus on another. It's like being in a room with a whole bunch of people and everybody's really loud, and maybe there's a band playing and you're trying to have a conversation with somebody next to you and you just can't, because the stimulation is so high, it's impossible. So that's really where I want each of you to step back and say, okay, how full is my mind versus how mindful am I being? So when I'm eating dinner, am I really being mindful of how delicious this spaghetti is, like this person is saying in this photo? Or it's fall or winter and we're really just being mindful of how beautiful it is outside. Like, I may hate the snow, but wow, on Sunday I looked outside and I said, it's really beautiful out there. I don't want to drive in it. I don't want to go anywhere, but I'm really just enjoying looking. So you're focusing on what you're doing or what is in front of you at that very moment. And that allows you to, one, be a better listener, be better at your performance in your job, and it will reduce your anxiety because you are being mindful of what is happening. Your mind just isn't full of what's going on around you. And I think that's where we struggle a lot with work-life balance. We forget that maybe we need to use our organizational techniques that we all have and say, okay, I can get to emails later. I need to worry about this meeting, or I need to plan for this event, so I need to delay the schedule that I'm working on right now. So really focusing on how we can take that fullness that we've got going on, the inability to maybe listen to others, especially if you are in a leadership role and you're somebody that needs to listen to your subordinates, or maybe you have a team member who relies on you for input. Being able to be a good listener is really important. And if we are so full up top with other things, it's really hard to give our 110% to whether it be our boss, our subordinates, or our teammates. And with that, that anxiety and stress really sticks with you. So I want us to remember the mindful versus mindful. So now we're going to look at improving our decision-making process. And I like to put this after visualizing the mindful versus mindful, because I think it allows us just to give ourselves a little bit of a better understanding of how, when our mind is full of stuff, it's hard to do things like deep breathing or meditation, journaling, making wrong decisions, being able to trust ourselves in the decisions that we're making. So if we have gotten to a point where we are able to improve our decision-making process because we're being mindful of the decisions that we're making, we're being mindful of our organization, of our task at hand, our day-to-day life. If these are things that we are allowing ourselves to use mindfulness, then when we say, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do 10 minutes of journaling before bed, we're going to be really mindful when we do that journaling. We will be able to say, today I'm grateful for, today I struggled with, or we can say, I'm going to do some deep breathing. I'm going to spend 4 minutes, 4 rounds of just deep breathing. After that, I may spend 10 minutes doing just a little bit of meditation to allow my brain to shut down, to allow me to get into bed, to allow me to get a good night's sleep. Because we know that stress, anxiety, having a mind full of stuff, we don't get things like good sleep. So now that we have an awareness of what's happening, we, one, can trust ourselves. We can choose to stay where we're at in our decision-making processes. We know that there's no wrong decision in where we're going because we're being mindful about it. And in turn, we're considering our own personal values and how we are able to focus and get through our everyday life, whether that is breathing, meditation, yoga, spirituality, exercise, eating habits, things like that are improving our decision-making process, because we are now taking all that fullness out of our minds and we're being more open to how we can focus on just being in the moment. So when we're in the moment, our behaviors and habits change, right? So we see mindfulness, it also is improving our chances of success in behavior changes, and it increases awareness of how our emotions influence decisions and behaviors. So there's a link here to a great website, mindful.org, and it talks a lot about your change of your habits and mindfulness and looking at main types of habits: habits of wanting, of distraction, resistance, doing. Um, Also looking at like biological and emotional needs that hinder habit change. And that goes back to things like our hunger and anxiety or anger, isolation, fatigue, loneliness. Um, if we think about how our habits are formed, then and how our brain works in forming habits, it really takes us back to mindful versus are we being mindful. So understanding that our habits can be formed good or bad based on our mindfulness that we're using. So if we're not being mindful of what's going on around us, then we're going to create bad habits, right? And our brain takes all those things that we do it it just becomes a habit. It's like eating sugar. I know we talked about that last week. It may not be the caffeine that we need 6 cups of a day, but it may be the sugar that we need at every meal. And so understanding that that's a habit that's formed, our brain thinks that we need it, and now we have to figure out how to adjust it to say, I don't need to have dessert after every meal. I maybe just need to have dessert after one meal. And then next week, I'm going to go from having dessert after one meal every day to having it after 4 meals. And then to where we get ourselves to where we're like, oh, now I'm down to only having dessert one day a week. And I'm splurging when I do that. So understanding those behavior and habit changes and being able to increase our own awareness of our own emotional influences and decisions with our behaviors. So, and I know it sounds so simple to say, this week I'm only going to do it, 6 days, and next week I'm going to put it down to 4. But it's much harder than that, because when we form habits, it's just normal life, right? So when we start becoming more mindful of those and we open ourselves up to change, then we start making bigger change in those habits and finding that those biological factors, emotional factors that hinder our habits start to change too. So our hunger is going to be different. Our anger and anxiety is going to be different. We're going to find that we are more mindful and we are less anxious. And even if we are angry, maybe we are not, maybe the anger feels different. We're not boiling inside, but we're just mad about it. And then we're finding ways to cope with it. Loneliness, also, isolation, we're going to find that we can maybe fit in better to our social networks that are around us, or within work. Fatigue, that's always the biggest one, especially being older adults and working and having other obligations. We really neglect our sleep in order to take care of all those other things. So if we are taking care of ourselves and we're being more mindful of those habit and behavior changes, then we're going to find that we're going to get more rest and we're going to feel better about the changes that we're making. So we're feeling better about the changes that we're making, right? We've become mindful of what our stressors are. We've become mindful of where we lack and having that mindful of junk. And now we're looking at improving our performance, and we're saying that we have more focus and less anxiety. Rumination isn't affecting us as much, and we are less reactive to to factors that are outside of our control. So we're not reacting to negative. Um, we're not viewing thoughts about something else as being negative towards us. They may not even have anything to do with us. Understanding that if we're less anxious, that focus really does improve to say, hey, I'm going back to that mindful, and I know that yesterday or 2 days ago I was looking at my plate and I had, a calendar here and a meeting here and so many things that were going on, and I couldn't figure out how to manage them all. And today I'm saying I've put things on calendars, I've rearranged events, and I have managed to really focus on how I'm going to better view my day, and I will do that day by day. Or I'm going to say at the end of each day, I'm going to take the last 30 minutes to prep for my next day. And that's where my focus has come in, because I can say, this is what's happening, this is what's going on, and I know what I need to do to motivate myself to be mindful of each individual task I need to complete. With improving performance, we find a reconnection to ourself, right? So when we think about mindfulness of the body and experiences that we have and that are rooted within our body, and connecting to other experiences that allow us a feeling or a sense of being, something that makes us feel grounded, or aware, or that feeling or sense, even it's something that we feel like we can touch, or smell, of being alive. It's like what I talked about last week. When you pick up an animal, dog, cat, ferret, whatever it might be that makes you feel that sense of calm, and you smell it, and your body instantly relaxes. It gives you that sense of knowing yourself. So it's that reconnection of who are we, and then how is what is happening within ourselves affecting our body. So I know that if I'm having a bad day, and if that's what I'm picking up, and I'm, take that smell of, I don't know, it could be my niece, my 2-month-old niece, or my cat, or whatever it might be. And it's just pure, right? It's a pure sensation, emotion of knowing that this is calm. This made me feel better. This allows me to reconnect and refocus. Um, when we look of signs, from the body, like how do we disassociate from our mind? We look at it as a mind-body split, right? So we're obsessively thinking, or we are back to those judgmental thoughts or behaviors. We have feelings of numbing or being distracted, rushing, or procrastination. I am the queen of procrastination. Now, I do my best work because I procrastinate, but that's not always the right thing to do. So understanding how not being really connected, having a mind full of stuff, allows you to not be mindful of things that you have coming up. So I know that every week I have a mind body mental fitness seminar class for the next 6 weeks, and I need to make sure that I am ready and prepared for those. Now, it would be easy to do these, the day before. But if I did that, I don't believe that I would be giving you the best of the information that's out there. So, in turn, I work to make sure that I'm being mindful of, hey, this is a big one, because people want this information. They want to know how they can use mindfulness and meditation to help them with their stress or anxiety or positive work experiences or having a work-life balance. So, understanding that things like rushing or procrastination um, can be a huge factor in going back to things like connection or habits. So, when we say, I want to reconnect to myself, I asking ourselves again, who are we? And knowing that whatever senses are going on, they're making us feel a sense of being grounded and aware. So we know that we are in a state of that reconnection. We may not be there fully yet, but we're working to get there. We're building that connection, right? Building, building, building. And we now are noticing a new sense of understanding, predictability, an insight to return. We see that we're making progress, and that is the biggest one. When we notice these things in ourselves, we get excited. We have our emotions change, our feelings about ourselves change. We feel empowered to do more. When we pause and we take awareness to what's happening within our bodies and around us. It's not just even within ourselves, it's with the people around us. Do they see what's happening? So without getting lost in again those reactive thoughts or emotions or actions, and we're relating differently to experiences and acting rather than reacting. We feel our body. We have reestablished and connected and have a conscious mind. We now feel more relaxed and at peace within ourselves, that we are making the positive changes that we need to be mindful, to allow ourselves to see how we can use the different techniques such as breathing, yoga, meditation, exercise, healthy habits to connect and reconnect with others is key. Now we look at consequences of disconnection. So we've looked at reconnecting to ourselves and building that connection, but what happens when we cannot connect or we are continually disconnecting from ourselves, from others? I think a puzzle piece is really the best example of that, because if we don't have all the pieces to a puzzle, then it's not going to work, right? So if we don't have all the pieces within ourselves, if we're not being mindful of what's going on around us, if we're not being open, and we are continually being reactive instead of active, then we go back to those things that we talked about last week of, feelings of isolation, chronic pain, fatigue, anxiety, insomnia. Insomnia and fatigue, although in the same realm, are two very different things. Being fatigued, having limited amounts of sleep compared to being not sleeping at all because your mind is so full. You have so much on your plate. You're so anxious or depressed or whatever it might be. Those are things that we have to start being mindful about, because these consequences can have way bigger effects. So understanding that making our puzzle fit will in turn make us more conscious of what is going on. So I can tell you, I did a team building one time, And each group was given a puzzle. And of course, about halfway through, I realized half of our pieces are with the other team, and we have the other team's puzzle pieces. So as mad as I was, and I got up and I went over to the other side and I tried to find my pieces, I had to step back, reevaluate, take a few deep breaths, and be mindful of this isn't going to work. This isn't going to help me, because until I get together the pieces that do fit, the pieces that go with the one that I'm working on, I won't be able to go over and get the ones that I'm missing, because they are also having the same problem. You have to work with what you have before you can add the rest. So, do we ever finish them? No, because it only lasted so long. But it was the idea of, one, working in a team, and two, how does each individual person fit into that team? So when we think about the consequences, not only with ourselves but with others, like if we are not at our best, then we are going to affect all those around us. If we're tired, if we're in pain, if we're isolating ourselves and feeling depressed, then others will notice. And especially if we have like team projects that are due, they won't be 110%. So I really wanted to end mindfulness on consequences of disconnection, because really the consequences circle back around to understanding how we're able and how we want to change our behaviors and our habits, and how when we change those, it will improve our performance, and it will allow us to be connected to ourselves and connected to others. So with that, we've went through mindfulness. We're understanding what being mindful and having a mindful really is. That's like a great task, I feel, for you all to do, is take a piece of paper and write down mindful and mindful, and understand like this one is how my mind is so full. And then the other one is, how am I being mindful? What am I doing to be mindful about each and every moment that I'm spending today? And whether that is just noticing those flavors in your dinner, or taking a walk and enjoying, the cold weather on your face, or taking a long shower, or doing some deep breathing. All of those different things are going to help you build that habit change. And then we can talk about them next time when I see you in person. We've reached the end, and we've reached the resources. So I have given you a 5-minute break of office yoga on YouTube. We were going to do some of this from our seats, but bad weather brings, change. So we're going to you guys can do this from home or at your office at work. Look at them, view them, see if you even really like it. There's also 10-minute meditation for stress. I really like it. Our 4-7-8 breathing is there. He does a really good example of how you do 4-7-8 breathing. It's very simple. You let out all the air from your stomach, and then you breathe in for 4 through your nose, mouth closed. Hold that breath for 7, and then you're going to let it out for 8. And you do that 4 times. Doesn't take long, but you will really see how in your gut, how you can really feel a weight coming off. So I encourage everybody to really try the 4-7-8 breathing. And then some new research on how mindfulness changes the brain and how it doesn't. I'd like to throw that out there. I like people to read it, especially if you have kids. Um, they're saying now our children's brains aren't even developed until they're 27, and um, so how can we help them, be more mindful in decisions that we're making? Because our brains aren't fully developed. We're not equipped to yet make the right decisions at all the right times. So, and even as adults, we don't with fully functioning. I'm way over 27, and sometimes my decision making needs to be a little bit more mindful um, based on situations. So these are just a few things that you can look at. I'm really excited to, when we meet in person again, to just go over mindfulness and talk a little bit with each of you about how and where your mind is full and where you're mindful, and what ways you're going to change and how you're going to change those habits. So I encourage all of you to do your mindful / being mindful sheets. Also, utilize some of these mindfulness techniques, and then a little bit of homework if you're willing to do it. I know it's just something else on your plate, right? But if we are being mindful, then give yourself 5 minutes to just sit down and write down, how you want to improve, how you want to build connections, and in what way are you going to be better at in your habits and change. And then we'll talk about that. Thanks, everybody.